Hey class, today we're going to start off looking at a statistics overview, and then we're going to lead into some new vocabulary words for today's section. So if you'll locate these notes, and then you might want to locate a blank sheet of paper, because there's going to be some other things that you might want to write down that would be beneficial to you, okay? So first of all, when we're looking at these vocabulary words, we've discussed mean, median, and mode, and range, okay? So some of these are new. We've talked about minimum and maximum, but they're going to be called lower and upper extreme. And then we're going to take a look into some things called quartiles today. So as you copy these, mean is the average of values. Remember, you're going to take the sum and divide by how many values there were. Mean teachers give averages. Median, that's going to be your middle number. Remember, you're going to line those up from smallest to largest. And then if there's two numbers that occur in the middle, you take the average. Mode, the most. Remember, mode is the most, the one that occurs the most. Lower extreme is your smallest value, which is called your minimum. Upper extreme is your largest, which is your maximum. The lower quartile is the median of the lower half of the data, which is going to be called Q1. The upper quartile is the median of the upper half of the data, which is called Q3. The range is your max minus your min. And if you're looking at an interquartile range, it's going to be your Q3 minus your Q1. Okay, so we're going to take a look at quartiles of a data set. And if you notice right here, it's going to kind of explain what that is, and then we're going to look at a visual. So the three quartiles, which are Q1, Q2, and Q3, approximately divide an ordered data set into 4 equal parts. About 25% of the data fall on or below the first quartile, which is Q1, and about 50% of the data fall on or below the second quartile, which is Q2, and 75% of the data fall on or below the third quartile, which is Q3. Okay, so if we take a look and we think about this, and I do a cut here, and a cut there, and a cut there, okay? So with these 3 cuts, these are going to be kind of my quartiles, okay? So we have like a Q1, Q2, and Q3, okay? So we're going to think of those in terms of cuts. So when I draw this, you can see right here that we have 4 sections. Okay, we have 3 cuts, and we're getting 4 sections. So within those 4 sections, we have what's called 25% of the data. Okay, if you look, 25% falls on or below the first quartile. So that would be my 25%. 50% below the second quartile. If I look at all that now, I have 50% of the data, and 75% below the third quartile. So each of those 25% sections would add. So you would have 25% with your Q1, okay, and then 50 with your Q2, you look to the left, and 75 with your Q3. And of course, the whole thing would be 100. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to look at where we would have an even number of data points. So make sure you put even number, and I'll explain what that means, okay? That means I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I have 12 pieces of data. So that would be an even number, okay? I'm going to line this data up from least to greatest. So I'm going to look for the smallest number and then mark those out as you use those. So I got 150, 170, 171, 173, 174, 176. You got 2 178s. And then I have 2 180s. A 181, and lastly a 182. Okay, good. I got all that on that screen. Okay, so what I need to do first is I need to try to figure out my middle. So I'm lining them up from least to greatest, and I'm trying to figure out my median, the middle value. So as I look at that, I'm just going to kind of match these up. And it looks like 2 of these right here fall in the middle. So I'm going to break this down, because that would be 50% of my data to the left and 50% to the right. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've got 50% of the data. So my Q2 stands for median, okay? The median is going to be 177. So below Q2, I have 50% of my data. Okay, now I'm needing to look at the left of Q2 to find Q1. So I'm going to go ahead and start trying to find the middle here. And it looks like the middle is going to cut right here in the middle of those two. So my Q1 is going to be 172. And then I'm going to look to the right. In the middle of that 180, again, is going to be 180. Okay, and to the right of Q3, we have about 75% of the data, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you have 9 values out of 12. which is 75% of your data. Okay, now I've got my quartiles. So if you notice, it says to find the quartiles of that set. So we're going to go ahead and list that. And actually, if you want to, you can just kind of highlight or box those answers like I did. That would be my 3 quartiles. Now, if I want to find the range of the data, I would do the upper right here, extreme, which is my highest value, excuse me, minus my lower extreme, which is 150. So my range, if I subtract those, would be 32. Okay, so we have our next. I think it asked, our new vocabulary word was interquartile range. So let's put IQR. IQR is where you take Q3 and you minus Q1. So your Q3 was 180. You minus your Q1, which was 172, and your IQR would be 8. And I'm going to go ahead and write down your max, which was 182, and your min was 150. These values will come into play here shortly as we kind of look at some different directions and then what it calls a 5-point summary. Okay. And I think you guys can see that the mode, the number that occurred the most, sometimes you have more than one mode. So it looks like with this one, we have 178 occurring twice and 180 occurring twice. So your mode would be 178 and 180, and that's called bimodal because you have 2 modes. And then if you wanted to find an average of this data, I'm going to take all these and add these up. Let me start with that 150. $174. And I would divide that by, I think we said we had, how many do we say we had? Was it 12? Yes, 12. So it would be around 174.4. Okay, so I'm going to go over a few calculator steps before we go to the next question. And this might be something you want to write on your paper. We're going to type in this data as it is in the calculator, and the calculator will help sort the data. So if I have went too fast, just pause now because I'm going to go to the calculator. Okay, so I'm going to go to Stat, Enter, and I'm going to clear my list. And I'm going to type in the list just as it was on the paper. So I'm going to move this and go back. I'm going to type in just as it was before I mark those out. So 171. Okay, so I missed one. Did I miss one? No. So when you look, that next 13, that means that would be your next data value. So if you had 12 data entries, that would tell me my 12th one was 180. So you always want to count those and make sure it matches. Okay. Now to sort, we're going to hit the word stat. We're going to scroll over to 2, so scroll down to 2, excuse me, sort A, and then you have to do second number 1 to tell it to sort L1, close the parenthesis and hit enter. Now it says it's done. So we're going to go to stat and enter, and you're going to see that it has taken those and it has put those now from least to greatest. So 150, 170, 171, where we just worked that just a minute ago. So it's going to put all those numbers from least to greatest. And that's very helpful, especially when you have a lot of data points and you don't want to order all those. To calculate your stats, you're going to hit stat, you scroll over to calculate, and you pick number 1, and you keep hitting enter. Okay, that was our mean, which was our average. That's the sum of your x's, the sum of your x squares, your sample standard deviation, your population standard deviation, the number of data entries. Now notice there's an arrow down. So if you scroll down, you see your minimum value, you see your Q1, you see your median value, you see your Q3, you see your maximum value. Okay? So I'm going to put this back here for you to copy in case you didn't get that just a moment ago, because that's going to be helpful here in a few minutes when we check our answers. Pause it if you did not have enough time to copy. The other thing that you might want to copy down, if you did not write this down before, is that stands for sample, standard deviation. Remember, you have to square it to get your variance. That stands for population. Standard deviation, you have to square it to get your variance. X bar is your mean. Then you have the summation symbols, the sum of your x's, the sum of your x squares, and n is your number of data entries. I'll put this through one more time. You can pause it if it's whatever you need to write down. Okay. Now, as we go to the next one, this definition deals with the interquartile range. So some of this is going to come back and review over what I just spoke with you about. And the symbol for that is IQR. Okay, it is a measure of the variation that gives the range of the middle of the data. So you're getting the range from the middle 50% of the data. It is the difference between the third and first quartiles. So your formula, again, is Q3 minus Q1. So if you look, we'll just go back through and make, I need 3 cuts. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we'll make my 3 cuts. Okay. And this would be, remember, my Q1, Q2, Q3. So if I take Q3 and I minus Q1, it's giving you the spread of the middle 50% of the data. Okay, so that's your interquartile range. Now, we're going to take a look at the odd number of data entries. So let's do it by hand, and then we will check in the calculator. So we're going to start with 150. 170, 171, 173, 74, 76, 78, 78 again, 180, 181, and I'm running into that other 182, okay? So I'm going to mark those. I'll just rewrite that over. 150, where you can see it better. I thought I was going to be able to get all that to fit, but it didn't work out that way. So I'm going to use this long white paper again. I think that was 2 178s. And then I believe it was 180, 181, and 182. Okay, I think you can see all those on that screen now. Okay, so I'm going to mark these off. I'm looking for the one in the middle. So this time, that number is going to be my median, which again is Q2. Okay, then I'm going to look, since this is in the middle, I'm going to look at the lower and the upper half of the date. So now I'm going to match those up. So my Q1 is going to be 171. Then I'll do the right side of the data. And the Q3 is 180. Okay, so this says to find the quartiles. So we'll go ahead and put Q1, 171, Q2, 76, Q3, 180. And that would be the 3 quartiles. Now, let's type the data in just to practice that. So when you have to clear that out, you're going to go to Stat. You're going to hit Enter. You're going to go to the top and mash Clear, Enter. Okay, and I'm going to type the data in just as it was, so it's not ordered. And I had 11 entries, yes. Okay, so let's try to remember what we go to. We're in statistics class. We're going to hit Stat, and we want to sort it right here. So I'm going to go down to Sort. Where do you want to sort it at? You want to sort it in your L1. So second one calls up your L1. And then you close your parenthesis, and then it says you're done. Okay? So if you go back to your Stat and enter, it's got them ordered from 150 all the way to 182. Now to calculate, we're going to go to Stat Calculate, and we're going to go to number 2. And we're going to check our other answers. I must have hit something too fast. Stat Calculate, number 1. I think I said number 2. I shouldn't have went to 2. Stat Calculate, number 1. So I'm going to scroll down to what we're looking at today. So my Q1, my Q2, and my Q3. So all of those are correct. Okay. Okay, now as we go to what is called a 5-number summary. When you're doing your homework, it will ask you for a 5-number summary. and this is what it's wanting. So go ahead and put minimum, Q1, Q2, Q3, and max. Okay, my minimum value was 150 when you think back to the data that we organized. My maximum value was 182. My Q1 we got a while ago was 171. Q2 was 176. And Q3 was 180. And I must have forgotten my 1 right here. So that was supposed to be 176 if you had a question about that. So go back and fix that because it was 176. Now you can check this in the calculator. Notice that it's going to have your max there and it's going to have your min there. So I'm just going to kind of bring this over and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your 5-point summary. So that's your 5-number summary. And notice that these numbers go from least to greatest. Okay? So notice it goes from the small to the large. Now, we've talked about outliers. An outlier is a data entry that's far removed from the other data entries. But there is a formula to actually prove and decide if something is an outlier. And if something is an outlier, it's going to lie 1.5 times away. So from the inner quartile range. Okay, so I'm going to let you copy down first. We've got to find the inner quartile range. Second, we want to multiply 1.5 to the inner quartile range. And then you've got to look 2 directions. So an outlier can lie to the left of the data, or it could lie to the right. So if it's more than 1.5 times the inner quartile range, then you're going to have an outlier. Okay, so with our inner quartile range, we're going to take Q3 and minus Q1. So our Q3 was 180.
Teachers, please pardon the interruption. For just a couple of quick announcements. Seniors College application day.
So we're going to take the Q3, which is 180, and we're going to minus 171. So that's going to give us an inner quartile range of 9.
Good afternoon. Boys interested in playing basketball during the 2020-20.
So since we have an inner quartile range of 9, we have to look at that and see if 1.5 times to the left and 1.5 times to the right of that to see if we have any numbers that lie there. So we're going to take 1.5, and you always use 1.5 times inner quartile range. So multiply that to 9. And that will give you 13.5. Okay, so what you need to do here is you need to look to the left of your Q1. So if you remember, our Q1 was 171. Okay, so my Q1 was 171. I'm going to minus whatever I got here, 1.5 times the inner quartile range. So really what I'm minusing here is a 9. Oh, my bad. I'm minusing a 13.5. I put that 9 there. Okay, so I'm minusing the 13.5. So I'm doing 171 minus 13.5. Okay, this 13.5 is going right there. So when I take 171 and I minus 13.5, That gives me 157.5. Okay, then I'm going to look to the right of that. So again, it's Q3 plus. So looking to the left, we subtract. Looking to the right, we're adding. So this is going to be my Q3 was 180, and I'm adding that 13.5, which would be 193.5. Okay, so what I have to do is I have to think about what this means. So I think about algebra. Okay, so I need to think and see if any of my numbers are going to lie outside that range. So if I'm thinking of algebra and I have a number 157.5 and one at 193.5, okay? I don't want anything outside that range. Anything outside that range is considered a definite outlier. So what we have to ask ourselves, was there any numbers that were smaller than 157.5? Okay, so we did have one. We had an outlier at 150. 150 is smaller than 157.5, so it would lie out here somewhere, away from this area inside. Okay, then I have to ask myself, is there any other ones that are to the left of 157.5? No, 170 would be inside this part. Then I look to see if anything is higher than 193.5. My highest value was 182. Okay, so you would look to see if anything is lower than 157. We had a 150, or if anything was higher than 193.5. So the only outlier that we had within that data was 150. So those are the steps that you're going to use to figure out if something is truly an outlier. So definitely copy that down. And remember, whatever you get for this portion right here, you're going to add it to Q3, and you're going to subtract it from Q1. I want you to go to the very back page of the notes, or it's probably your last page. And we're going to take a look at how to draw a box and whisker plot from that data that we were just working with. Okay, so before we actually draw one, I'm going to show you above this example what it would look like. Okay, you would have a whisker, okay, and then you have a box, and then you have another whisker. Now, sometimes the whiskers vary in length, sometimes they're exactly the same. What goes on this whisker is a minimal. What goes on this whisker is the max. The end of this box is going to be your Q1. You will draw the line through the box and put your Q2 for your median. And then at the end of that box will be your Q3. So it's going to be your 5-point summary. Okay, if you want to go ahead and label the graph here, we're going to take this information and graph the box and whisker. So I believe our lowest point was 150.
At this time, our car riders from Fine Arts Wing, Theme Wing, and Gym report to the front. Car riders
our highest point was 182.
Gym report to the front.
Our Q1 was at 171. Our Q2 was at 176. Draw a line through that one. And our Q3 was at 180. Okay, so this is where the box will come from. So we'll draw the box here. And then you have this whisker and that one there. So you can see that 150 definitely looks like it was an outlier, and we showed that it was with that formula. Okay, sometimes you'll see where they actually put the numbers underneath it. So I'm going to put my 150, 171, 176, 180, and 182. And if you see them put that here, I'm just going to remind you, this is where your minimum goes. That's your Q1, Q2, Q3,
At this time, our car riders from B Wing
and
report to the
max.
front of the school.
Q3 was right here. Okay, so Q3 was right there, okay? And this was your max. Okay, it's not too bad. So just remember your low point, your high point, Q1, Q2, Q3. Because my lines kind of got messed up a little bit. Okay, looking at your last page for today, we're going to go back over the calculator thing. So what I would ask for you to do is go ahead and pause the video and see if you can get all this into the calculator, and then come back and see if you got it right. And it kind of tells you here on this little sheet what to do also. And then we're going to work this last question. Okay, as you are returning, when you type the values in, make sure you went to Stat and Enter and edited those. To sort those, you go to Stat again and you go to Sort A, and you do second L1, and it'll sort your data. Then you go back to your Stat, you scroll over to Calculate, and you go to number 1. And now we have our information, okay? So it should look similar to the information here that I have with the calculator, okay, that's on your paper. So we're going to write down what these numbers are and what we got. So the first one was mean. So I'm going to round that off to about one place, so 75.3. The second one is the sum of your x values, 1,205. N represents the number of entries you typed in. That was 16. Now to get to your lowest value and these numbers here, I believe we've got to keep scrolling down. So now we're getting to our minimum. We've got our minimum and our Q1 and our median and our Q3 and our max. So remember, that's that 5-number summary. So now I have a 52, 67, 73.5, 83, and 98. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remind ourselves a few things here at the top. So let's try to figure out the range. The calculator is not going to tell you the range, but you can figure that out if you take your max minus your min. So our highest value was 98, and we'll subtract our lowest value, which was 52. So we have 46. The mode is the number that occurs the most often. So let me go back to where we typed those in. We can kind of see that. Looks like 66 occurred twice. 72 occurred twice. So it looks like I have two modes. So I have a mode of 66 and 72. Since you have two, it's called
The following bus riders are now
bimodal.
dismissed. Bus 45, bus 40.
To get the inner quartile range, you're going to do Q3 minus Q1. So our Q3 was 83, and I'm going to subtract 67. So 83 minus 67 will give us 16. Okay, so our inner quartile range is 16. Okay, what we need to do next is determine if there's any outliers. Okay, so let's think back to what we did with outliers. We need to first of all remember that we want to multiply 1.5 times the inner quartile range. And that's going to give us 24. We want to look to the left and to the right. So we're going to look to the left and we're going to look to the right. Okay, remember when you're looking to the left, you're going to take your Q1 and you're going to minus that 24. Then you're going to look to the right. So you're going to do your Q3 and you're going to add that 24. So our Q1, I believe we said was 67. And our Q3 was 83. So this would be 43. And this would be 107. So what we have to ask ourselves, do we have any outliers that are any numbers that are lower than 43? All of our data entries need to be between 43 and 107, or we have an outlier. So let me go back to where we ordered it. I don't see anything lower than 43. So I'm going to go to my high value, which is my max. And I don't see anything higher than 107. Okay, and you also can compare that to your max and your min. So my lowest value was 52. Okay, so it's not lower than 43. My highest value is 98, and that's not bigger than 107. So we're going to put none. Okay, we're just going to do a rough sketch of a box and whisker, just where I can remind you. So the low.
At this time, bus 46 is the.
So this is going to go from least to greatest. So your lowest value we said was 52. Then we have Q1, which is 67.
Students, at this time, all remaining bus riders can go to the cafeteria.
Then we have Q3, which is 83. In the middle, you have a median of 73.5. And then your high value is going to be 98. So when you graph that on the number line, just make sure that you put your minimum Q1, Q2, Q3, and max. Because my paper got messed up with those arrows while ago. I wanted to go through it one more time. Okay? So make sure you do your assignment on that. And you notice it's not too bad. This stuff's not too bad. It's probably getting a little bit easier for you. And we are getting close to the test because this was the last section. So make sure you're completing your work and starting to study. Hope you have a great day.